In this video on the migration from F4x to Management Reporter, we'll be covering two separate sections, the preparation for the migration and then the steps to perform post-migration. In the preparation section, there are four main steps. Step number 1, deleting any old, no longer used data in your F4x system. Step number 2 is possibly adjusting any of the reports that you are going to be migrating over to Management Reporter. And then possibly, step number 3, possibly making adjustments to your Dynamics GP system. And the step number 4, compacting the spec sets and the system database in the F4x system. So let's go over each of these steps in detail. When you are going through the deleting of the no longer used and old data in your F4x system, you first would it's recommended that you export all of your building blocks out to a file before you start deleting those. Just in case you delete something that you didn't intend to, you can bring it back from your backup. To do this, you first need to know what specification set each of your active companies are using. And to find that out, we're going to go to the company information window. So if we click on the company selection at the top and choose information, you'll see all the companies that are set up in your F4x system listed on the left. As you click on a company, you will see what specification set it's assigned to. So the main thing is I highlight each of your active live companies and note the specification set. They may all be using the same one or they may be using different ones. In this case, we have one live company called Company 1 and it's using the specification set equal to default. Now that we know that, I'm going to close this window. I'm going to go back up to the top and click on Company, but this time choose Specification Sets. Then you'll want to highlight each of the building blocks, or excuse me, each of the specification sets that you noted from the company information window. So we only had one that is being used by an active company, and that's the default one. So I have that highlighted and I click the Export button. When this window opens, I click the Select All button to select all of the catalogs. Then you'll click on each of the tabs and click Select All again to make sure that you've captured all of the building blocks in the specification set. Once you've done that, you click the Export button and this window will open up, by default going to the IO data folder, and that's exactly where you want to save this. And you could call this something such as all F4x before cleanup and click Save. That's going to export all of those building blocks for that specification set. If you have other specification sets used by your active companies, you would click on each one and follow the same steps. Once you've done that, you click Close, and now you can start considering the building blocks that you no longer need. So you would start with your catalog of reports and go through each of these into determining which ones that you're no longer using. Once you've decided that, for example, if I decide that P&L number 2 is no longer being used, I can select that report catalog and then I can delete that on this window, but first I want to make note of the row format and the column layout and the reporting tree, if there is one, being used by the report catalog, because I want to delete these as well if they're not being used by other report catalogs. So I've made note of those and now I'm going to delete this catalog. You'll do that for each of the catalogs that you're no longer using, and then you'll close this window. And now to get rid of those related building blocks, you go up to the upper left, click File, and then Delete, and choose the appropriate one. We'll start with Row. You may recall that P&L 2 was being used by that report catalog that I just deleted. I'm highlighting that, I click OK, and it gives me a final prompt, and I click OK. Now, if I do choose a building block that is being used by an active or existing report catalog, then I will be warned of that, and you'll have the opportunity to say no, you don't want to delete that building block. So for example, if I go to column and I recall that this was the column being used for that report and I click OK to delete it, it's going to give me a warning, and at that point I say no by clicking the no button, that I do not want to delete that building block. You'll continue to do that for each of the different types. We'll go on to tree, and let's say that I'm going to delete the department number 2 because I know that's not being used. I click OK and click OK. So that's deleted as well. So now that I've gone through and I've deleted the report building blocks that are related to the catalogs that I've deleted, there may be some other building blocks that I can get rid of that have no longer been linked to any of the catalogs. And to identify those, I'm going to go back to that export window that I was on earlier. I'm going to go up to Company, click on Specification Sets, highlight my specification set and click Export, then click Select All. And doing so, as we saw before, it highlights all of the related rows, columns, and trees. So those on these other tabs that are not highlighted, these are building blocks that are no longer being used with report catalogs. So you can consider if those should be deleted as well. So in this case, I'm going to get rid of that row. And if I go to columns, there aren't any that aren't being used. If I go to trees, I see that there's a couple more trees that aren't being used. So again, it's your decision as to whether those should be deleted or migrated. So in my scenario here, I'm going to get rid of that one row format, and I'm also going to get rid of this departments-LOC2 reporting tree. So I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to close this window. I'm going to go back up to File, and then delete, and I'm going to go to row. I'm going to get rid of the P&L with OH. I go back, File, delete. This time I choose tree, and I choose the tree that I no longer need. Okay. So now you want to consider, for those reports that you're going to keep, there's a few things that are required for the migration for those reports to successfully migrate or migrate as successfully as possible. And the first of that is to make sure that you don't have any spaces at the beginning of any of the names of the report catalog, the row, the column, or the tree. And the easiest way to see that is if you click on the Catalog of Reports button, you can view all of the building blocks here on this window. And you'll see right away that the row format balance sheet, that happens to have a space at the beginning. F4x allows for that, but Management Reporter will not. So I need to get rid of that space there. So I'm going to select this here, and I'm going to open up that particular row format, and I'm going to do a File, Rename, and I'm going to remove that space. I close the building block, and if I now go to my lookup window, I can say yes to my changes, and now I can visually see that that's been corrected. Another thing that you'll want to make sure of is that all of the companies are set to an actual company as opposed to the at any option. So for example, this report here, if it had been set to this at any, I would need to change that. So it would look like this. If I save this and click Find, on this list here, you want to look for any company that says at any and change that to an actual live company in your F4x system. So I'll change that back to company 1. This is very common to see the at any when you're using reporting trees that are consolidating different companies. And again, it works for F4x, but for Management Reporter, it needs to be set to an actual existing company. So then those are the main changes that you'll need to make for the reports that you're going to be migrating over to Management Reporter. There's a couple settings, there's a few settings that you need to consider over in Dynamics GP. So over in Dynamics GP, first you want to consider your account segments for your GL accounts. And to do that, you're going to click on the Financial button to go to the Financial page. You're going to click on the Administration button to come to the Administration page, and in the Setup section you want to go to the Company section of that. So you're going to scroll down till you see Company and then Account Format. On this window, you want to take note of what these segment names are. In each of your companies that you're migrating, you're going to need to make sure that each of these names are the same. Now, some of your companies may have additional segments. Maybe one company has 3 segments, another company has 5. Those first 3 segments have to have the same name. And you'll be able to change that after the migration, but during the migration they have to be the same. So if one company says segment 1 and another company says division, you have to decide. You have to make change one of the companies to be division, or change one of the companies to say segment 1. So across the board, all the companies have the same name for segment 1. So that's one thing you need to check in Dynamics GP. Another thing that you need to check is the functional currency for each of your companies. And to do so, you'll click on the financial page, the button for the financial page, and you'll go to the setup section. So you'll scroll down to setup, and you'll see multi-currency. Each company that's being migrated has to have a functional currency in this field. If for some reason it's empty, you can go ahead and select the appropriate currency for that company. Also, if you're using multi-currency in your F4x reports, you're going to need to set up your multi-currency setup window here in Great Plains for the exchange rate tables that used to be in F4x now need to be in Great Plains, and you'll need to define which tables are used for the currency conversion for your consolidated reports. And then back over in F4x, once you've cleared out your different building blocks, you also want to clear out companies that you no longer need. And we can go do that by going back to the company window, clicking at the top, company information. And we want to remove any test companies, or as well as the 2 demo companies in F4x. So for example, this is a test company, so we're going to get rid of that. We click on it and we click the delete button at the top. And then same thing with Fabricam and Fabricam Canada, so that you're left with just your actual live companies. So once you've done all of those steps, the final steps before you have the migration performed by RoseASP is you're going to compact your spec sets as well as the system database. In this case, we only have one specification set that we're using, so we only have one specification set to change. And to do that, we go up to the top. You want to compact the specification sets as well as the system database within F4x. To do so, you come to the top and click File, and then Compact F4x Database, Current Spec Set Database. That means it's going to look at the company that you're logged into at the moment into F4x. It's going to go to the company setup window and see what specification set is assigned to that company. In this case, it's default. So we'll click on that, and it gives us just a last chance to prompt to make sure that we really want to do that, and you would click yes. And then it will give you a message that it's done. You go back again, File, Compact F4x Database, and this time you're going to choose the F4x System Database. And you'll say yes, and then you'll get a prompt when it's completed. At this point, your system is ready, your F4x system is ready for migration to Management Reporter. You'll be notified by RoseASP when your reports have been migrated over to Management Reporter. And at that point, you'll be going through the steps listed here for post-migration. And those steps are: launch Management Report Designer and review your report definitions. Open up each report building block that has a red symbol, which indicates that there are errors. And then you'll generate each management report and compare it to the corresponding F4x report and adjust the report if necessary. Once RoseASP notifies you that your F4x reports have been migrated to Management Reporter, you're ready to perform the steps in the post-migration section. There's 3 main steps you'll want to follow. The first step is launch Management Reporter, Report Designer, and review your report definitions. That will take you to step 2, which is adjusting each report building block that has a red symbol, and that indicates that there are errors on the building block. And the third step is to generate each of your Management Reporter reports and compare each of the reports to the corresponding F4x report. If you find that there's still some differences between your Management Reporter report and your F4x report, you'll need to adjust your Management Report a little bit more if necessary. So in following the first step, launching Management Report Designer, you'll find on your Rose ASP desktop that you will have a new icon called Report Designer. You'll click on that, and that will open up Report Designer, and it will bring you to this window here called Report Definitions. Now when you first launch the Management Reporter program for the very first time, you may get a prompt window that asks you to enter your login and password. You'll enter your Great Plains login and your Great Plains password, and you'll be required to do this for each of the companies that you have set up in Management Reporter. So if you have 4 companies set up in Management Reporter, you will be prompted 4 separate times to enter your login and password. But if there's a checkbox that says to save your credentials, so you won't have to do that ever again. Once you put in your login and password and mark the box to save your credentials, you'll be brought to this window here where it lists your report definitions. And notice you will see a red icon indicating that's an error. And in this example here, all of these reports are indicating that there's some sort of an error. But don't be alarmed, because oftentimes one fix of a building block will fix many of the different reports. For example, if you have multiple reports using the same row format, once the row format is resolved, or I should say row definition is resolved, that will resolve each of the reports that are using that row format. So it's not as bad as it looks. So you'll want to go through each of your reports and make it necessary adjustments. And Management Reporter does help you identify what the errors are. I'm going to go through a few examples on these reports here. So I'm going to choose, for example, this report called Balance. And to do so, I double click on that. That will access that particular report definition. It's going to open it up on the screen. And it gives me a message that this has been modified and that there's some errors that need to be corrected. So we click OK to that. And we're going to look at the row definition that's being used by this report. And to do so, I click on the button to the right. That's going to open up the row definition. Again, it gives me a message that there's some errors. I click OK. And in a moment, you will see that it says again, it tried to fix the errors for you, but it can't. We click OK, and it shows you the red symbols where the errors exist. And this is a prime example of a problem that a condition that occurred in F4x that didn't cause a problem, but it does in Management Reporter, and that's a blank, empty row code. Management Reporter does not allow for empty row codes. I'm going to scroll up a little bit to see the row numbers here. Now, I need 2 row numbers here, and I don't have enough in between these two, so I'm just going to change this number here from 481. I'm going to make this 482, so then I can make this 480 and 481. Once I make the change and click Save, that will tell me if there's any other errors in the building block. I didn't get any error messages, so that was the only problem in this row definition. I close that, and when I click Save on the catalog, or actually now I should check the column layout and see if there's any errors on the column definition. I click on the button to the right, and again it says that there's an error. I click OK, but strangely enough I don't get any error icons. And if I were just to click Save and close the window and then click Save to save my report, notice that the icon has gone away. So in some cases with this column, there weren't any absolute errors that I had to adjust. There is an enhancement or a recommendation I have for this column layout, but it's not an actual requirement, and that recommendation I have is for column B. This is pulling amounts from the general ledger, FD standing for financial dimensions, meaning that it's pulling amounts from your general ledger. For amount fields, I would not put WT on the print control, and this is something that Management Reporter does automatically. WT stands for wrap text, and what that means is if there was an amount that was greater than the width of this column, a very large amount in this case, it would, rather than truncating or putting asterisks in the field, it's going to wrap the dollar amount, which would look very strange on a financial statement. So normally you don't want that on your amount column, so you want to take that WT off. Another recommendation I have is these column widths. You normally would not have a width that is in the 1/10 of a percent or something along those lines. So what we can do here is just make these round numbers. I'm going to make this 50, and I'm going to make this 14. Again, that's not absolutely necessary, but it's a little bit easier in the eye and a little bit more direct as to what the width of the columns is going to be. The WT can remain on the description column. What that means is if there's a description on a row that's greater than the width of the column, so again that would have to be a pretty wide description, greater than 50 spaces, it would wrap the text, it would continue the text on to the next row. And that is fairly common for a description column. If you didn't want that to happen, if you wanted it to truncate it, you could take the WT off. I'm going to save my change, and I'm going to close this. And again, I showed how the error message has already gone away on that report. We're going to take a look at another report. Let's take a look at the INC_analysis report. Double clicking on that to make sure that I've brought this report to the screen. Again, it gives me a message that there's some errors involved. So I click OK, and I'm going to start with the row. I'm going to click on the row definition. Again, it gives me an error message. I give it a moment. Gives me one last message, and it takes me to where there's a problem. And basically it says that there's a problem with this total. So I'm going to scroll up so I can see what's going on here. And it basically says that it's going to be rows 310 to 370. Well, notice we do have row 310, but we don't have a row 370. We can fix that by making this underscore row, which would be the end of the range for the total, make this 370, and that corrects the problem. Now, if I click Save, the error message goes away. And I didn't get any other error messages, so that's telling me that that's the only error that was on that building block. So I can close that, and now I want to take a look at the column. And again, it says that there's some errors. I'm going to click OK to that. And it brings me to this cursor, that brings the cursor to the very end here. Again, I don't have any red icons, so there isn't anything that I absolutely have to change. But again, I would recommend taking the WTs off of the total columns so that you don't run the risk of an amount being wrapped. And so this here, I've got two things here. I'm suppressing the column if it's all blanks, which that can be certainly appropriate, but I don't want the WT. So I'm going to go here to the edit bar, and I'm going to get rid of that WT column. Now, I've got that same condition on some of these other ones, so I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste that to the other ones. And I have a few more over here. Let's see if I have some more. I'm going to scroll over to the side. And yes, I do have quite a few. So I'm going to highlight and drag and right click and paste. And then lastly, I don't want the wrap text in this one here, so I can do something similar. I can get rid of that on the edit bar, and then I can copy this and paste that to these other two. Again, I can leave the wrap text on the description column if I'd like. And then again, I have some widths here that look a little odd. I can leave them as they are, or I could change this to be 25, this one to be 12, and then I can copy this 12 across all these 11.76 ones here. And that one's already at 12. I'll make this one 15. Let's see what else we have here. I'll make this one 14 and this one 15. Other than that, I think it looks pretty clean, so I'm going to click Save and close the row, the column definition. And now when I click Save in the upper left, the error message goes away. So you would continue doing this going down each of these reports. Let's take a look at a few others and see if we can find some that have some other examples of migration errors. If I double click on this income statement report, again it tells me that there's some errors. I'm going to open up the row, click OK to the error messages. And right up top I can see that this is a situation where I have a blank row, and this one's pretty clear. I'm going to make this row 100, click Save, close this. Let's take a look at the column. Now this one I do get some error icons. I have 4 of them in the header. So I'm going to take a look at this. I'm going to double click on this, and what's happening here is that the header is set to spread from B to C, so from column B to column C. But notice column C has its own header. So Management Reporter is saying that that's not appropriate. I can't spread this when there's something already in this column. Now you certainly could move the percentage down, or in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the spreading just to be from B to B. So we'll see it just as it's shown here on the screen. And let's see if this is the same. Yes, this one I can say to spread from D to D, and that takes care of my errors at the top. Now in the bottom here I have, or in the details section, I have 2 errors, and I'm going to stretch the column so I can see this a little bit better. And what this is saying is base divided by base row and then a percent sign. And in F4x, this was very common to have the percent sign in the formula. But in Management Reporter, it wants the percent to be put in a separate field in the format/currency override field. So what we need to do is get rid of that percentage. So I double clicked on the field, I backspace to get rid of the percentage. Then I go down to the format/currency override field, double click on that field, and I'm going to select the format category as percentage, and then down here I can specify how I want the negatives to show as well as the number of decimals, and if it's 0, if I want something special in there such as the word 0 or a dash or something along those lines. I'm going to click OK to that, and it puts that format in there for me. Now I can copy paste this over to here if I would like, or I can do the same thing by clicking here and choosing this. But to be consistent, I'm going to click on this one, right click, copy, come over here and paste that. And then again I want to take that percentage sign off. I double click and click backwards, and then I come down here 1 row and I can see that my errors are gone. Before I continue, I want to be sure and save my changes. And now I need to consider some of these enhancements or recommendations that I have of the print control of the wrap text, removing that from your FD or your calc columns. So I'm going to get rid of those. And then again, I can clean this up if I want to adjust the column widths to make these whole numbers. And again, that's purely up to you. If you don't mind the width out to the decimals, there's nothing wrong with that. Management Reporter certainly can handle that. So once I've made all the changes that I want, I'm going to save this and close it up. And then when I save my report definition, notice again that the icon goes away. And then let's look at a couple other reports. I'm going to take a look at this IS compare or comparative. And I'm going to take a look at the row. And apparently this row definition has already been resolved. You may recall that I had to add that 100 in there. So that's already been corrected. Let's take a look at the column definition. So this one is a little bit different. It's very much similar to the one that we just looked at, but this one is year to date rather than current period. I think is the main difference there. So again, I can come up here and take a look at my column headers and see that it's the spreading that's causing the problem. So I can quickly fix that. And then I have the same situation here with the percentage in the formula that I now need to put that in a different field. So I'm going to take those percentages off. I can come up to the edit bar up above if I prefer. And then I'm going to go down to the format setting. I'm going to select percentage out to 2 decimals. And then I'm going to copy that and paste that over to the other field. Removing the WTs on the amount columns. And then I can change the width here on my columns. And then I can save my changes. Close the window, click Save up above to save my report definition, and notice the error has gone away. And then lastly, we'll look at one more report. Let's see here. Let's look at the sales by month. We'll take a look at the row format, the row definition. And that one doesn't seem to have any errors any longer, so that one's okay. Then we'll look at the column. And again, I recognize this one because I recall having to remove the WTs. So this building block has already been corrected. So if I click Save now, the error message has gone away. So for many of these reports, you may just have to open them up, look at them, and click Save. So again, it should go fairly quickly for you. Now, as you're going through these reports, you can generate them and compare each of them to the F4x corresponding F4x report, or you can go through, get rid of all of your errors, and then run your reports. It's up to you as to the order that you do that third step of comparing to the report in F4x. But before we do that, I do want to point out that there could be some other building blocks that you had migrated that you may need to adjust. And so to be 100% sure that you've catched everything to be resolved, you want to also click on the Row Definitions tab. And once you've gone through all of your reports and correcting them, all of these with the row definitions displayed should have the symbols gone. They should all look nice and clean. But you just want to be sure. And if you should see one on this display that isn't, you should double click on it, just as we did from going from the report, and then see what it is that it is unhappy with. Now this one here, we have a couple things going on here. So first off, it's having problems with the sales total. It says 160 to 280. We have 160, but we don't have 280. So again, this can be easily fixed by changing this last row to 280. If I click Save, that resolves that, but it's got a few other errors down here. And these errors listed here have to do with non-printing rows. So if you don't have reports with non-printing rows, you may not have this issue, but many people do have reports with non-printing rows. And what Management Reporter doesn't like is it to have a non-printing row with a DES in the format code, as well as an underscore. It doesn't like those. So you merely highlight the DES and click your delete key. You want to leave the CBR. I'll talk about that in a moment. You're going to click on the underscore that has an error, and you're going to delete that. And then we're going to delete the DES here and the DES on this non-printing one and on this non-printing one. And if we go back up to the top here, the CBR, we need to keep that because that is used in the percentage column on the column definition, so it needs to know what row to use as the base in the percent calculation. But a CBR row by nature does not print, so there's no need to have an NP on the print control, so we can delete that. Now let's see what we have left if we click Save. And we're down to just one here, and that's another underscore. So I'm going to get rid of that underscore and see if there's anything else on this. And it looks like I have a little bit more down here, so I need to scroll down to see what I have left. So I have another underscore to get rid of. I click on it and click the delete key. And then lastly, I have some blank row codes. Now I could assign row codes to all of these, but I really don't need these last rows here. If you were to assign row codes to these rows, you would end up with a blank last page of your report. So you don't want to have any rows that you're not using. So we're going to highlight these rows, and I'm going to right click and choose delete row. So I got rid of those. The only one I have left to deal with is my underscore row, so I'm going to type in 1480 on that row, and I'm going to come up to the top and click Save, and it looks like all of my errors have been resolved. So now I can close this here. So again, I most likely would have come to that building block had I gone through all of my reports in the report definition list, but I do recommend that you go to each of these additional windows for the rows, the columns, making sure that all of these are clean. Again, they should be clean based on the reports that you update, and then reporting tree definitions to make sure that those are clean as well. Once you've done that, then you'll be able to run the reports in Management Reporter and compare them to F4x. I do want to point out one thing though. If you do have reports where you have this box here marked, use row definition from reporting tree, most likely that reporting tree has an error in it, and that would be if the reporting tree is referencing multiple row definitions. In F4x, of course, they were called multiple row formats, and F4x allows for that, but Management Reporter does not, and those reports will have to be revised so that you are using the same row format for that report. The report may need to be broken up into multiple reports to accomplish the same result that you had in F4x. So once you've resolved all of your reports, then, or as you resolve the errors on your reports, you can run these individually. So for example, for the balance report, I need to move to that. Notice at the top right now I'm still on sales by month. I need to double click on balance to shift over to that report, and I can choose the period that I want to run this for if it doesn't default to the period that I want, and then click generate. What happens is you get a report queue status window, and it will give you the status of your report, and right now it's indicated that it's been queued. Now it's processing, and then down below it gives us a little more detail as to what processes it's performing. And now it's launching the Management Reporter Report Viewer, which shows the reports that are getting generated over to the report library. And this, you'll be able to then compare this report to your F4x report. Of course, normally you'll see the whole report, but for privacy purposes, we're not displaying the dollar amounts on the video. And you can easily export the report to Excel if you'd like to compare your management report in Excel, your Management Reporter report to your F4x report. That would be a very quick way to compare results and find any differences should they exist. When you're done reviewing your report, you'll be returned back here to the report designer window, and you can close the report queue status window. That brings you back to the report that you left behind, or where you had left off in Management Report Designer. So again, you choose your report, And if it prompts you to save changes, I would click yes, just in case there was any final adjustments that you had made. And then again, you consider the period that you want to run the report for, and click the Generate button. Again, your report will be generated in its entirety, and you'll be able to review the report on the screen and compare that with your report, the comparable report in F4x. So if we review our list here, we went through launching Management Report Designer and reviewing the report definitions. We went through adjusting each building block that has a red symbol, and because those symbols indicate errors. And then we went through generating a report in Management Reporter that you can use to compare that to the corresponding report in F4x. And of course, adjusting a management report, very similar to how you would do in F4x. If we go back to the Report Designer, if you found something that you wanted to adjust, you would merely come back to the building block and make your adjustments, and then save and close the building block. If you need assistance in making these changes, please contact your Dynamics GP partner.